Chad, can you hear me now?
I got you.
There we go. Okay. So everyone, let's go back real quick. Chad and I are with Renzo. We've been in the people business for the last 15 to 20 years. And we have been working with organizations to create cultures of excellence. We consider ourselves architects of human capital, of environments, and of outcomes. And what that basically means is that we want to help organizations design cultures that absolutely thrive. And so on today's webinar, our goal is to give you 1 to 2 things that you can implement right away. We understand that the work from home scenario is a little bit different for people who've never done that before. And Chad and I have been working remotely and working with remote teams for the past 15 to 20 years. So we have some tips and some ideas for you today. We understand that you've been webinared to death. So our goal is to make sure that we put as much solid content in front of you in a short amount of time as humanly possible. With that, there are some things that you need to be doing as leaders. And Chad, I'm going to kick this to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Adam. Can you hear me? All right, Adam?
I can, loud and clear.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. So listen, I think number one is we all know that this is crazy times right now. This is, we're all trying to, there's no playbook for this. Some of you have heard me say that. In the past couple of weeks, we've worked with thousands of leaders across our clients on how to manage this day by day. And so I think a couple things to remember is most of you probably spend a lot of time looking in the window. Especially if you're leaders, you look at your people, if you're parents, you look at your kids, you look at you're there to be the support system. And I think that it's important that you remember every once in a while that you got to look in the mirror. You have to look at your, how are you taking care of you? And I know that might be overplayed right now, but I just think it's never been more important than ever, is that you have to make sure that you are doing what you need to do to be at your best. So when you are working with your people, when you are there as a parent, as a spouse, as a significant other, whatever it is it might be, you're at your best to support the people around you that need you in that time. So a few things to think about when it comes to self-care. Number one is, do we have the essentials? So do I have what I need to make sure that my family is taken care of, that my team is taken care of, to make sure that we're able to weather this storm, if you will, and get through this? The other one is finances. And I know that that's a big question mark for some people right now, is how do we manage through the finances? How does it impact us? How does it impact our clients, our customers, the people that we serve? The internal environment, the external environment, which is, again, our customers and the people that we work with on a daily basis. How is this all going to impact? But I think we have to do what we need to do to make sure we're taking care of our finances. And then the other part of it is support. I think, again, a lot of times you are the support. I think you have to make sure that you also have a support system. Some people or somebody that you can reach out to, because this is a roller coaster of emotions. We're not always going to be on cloud 9. We're not always going to be in the depths of hell. But how do we manage through all of this as we go back and forth and make sure that we have outlets that we can turn to when we just need an ear, or we need somebody to listen, or we need to vent to somebody? And so make sure that you're having that as you go. A couple things with your team before Adam gets into the particulars is, there are 3 other things that I want to touch on. So number one is, I think it's important that we're transparent with our team. The world is not perfect right now. There's a lot of uncertainties right now. And to try to paint a picture of anything different is just one giant facade. And I think we all have to just be transparent with our teams, not paint gloom and doom, but also just be transparent with our people that we're managing this process just like they are, to help battle us and to help get us through this time. The other one is frequency. I think that in the absence of information, your people will make up their own conclusions. And I think we have to be more than ever out in front of this and be proactive. And again, some of you are familiar with this, but we talk about CAP all the time. We talk about how can we create clarity with our people, which Adam will dive into a little bit. How can we align with some of the things that we're doing right now, the situations that we're living in right now? And then the other one is purpose. How can we keep driving purpose with our people, so every single day there is something that they can grasp onto, feel a part of, and understand, especially in this virtual world where we're all isolated right now? How can they feel a purpose on a daily basis that allows them to stay in the game and keep moving this thing forward? And the last thing is be a calming voice. There's a lot of people that are in panic, or probably in panic, and just all these unquestionable things that are happening right now. And so how can you continuously be the calming voice? Again, not that everything's perfect, but allowing people to realize that we will get out of this eventually, and we will get back to whatever normalcy means at this particular time. And so those are some things, as Adam begins to walk you through some of this stuff, to keep in mind. So how can we make sure that we're taking care of ourselves? How can we make sure that we're transparent with our teams and being authentic and sincere? How can we make sure that we're getting ahead of it with communication and creating more frequency? And then how can we be that calming voice and be that support system that our team needs to help manage through all this? So Adam, if you have anything else to add to that, go ahead. If not, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I think it's great. Our goal here over the next several slides, and you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, we only have maybe 5 or 6 more to go through. Our goal is to give you as much content in the next 10 or 11 minutes as possible. And the goal of this is that you are mindful and empathetic with your teams and what they're going through. So many companies are not work from home. They're not prepared for remote work, that it becomes a bit of a challenge for people to be thrust onto a card table in their living room and working amidst the dog laying at your feet and the kids swirling around the home, maybe a spouse who's not usually home or is home and they're not used to you being home. So we're going to talk about how to be mindful and empathetic of what people are going through, starting with number 1. And there are 4 of these we want to share with you. Number 1 is there is a challenge that most people have when they go to remote work, and it is the time versus outcomes dilemma. Most people are used to spending 8, 9, 10 hours at the office. And when they're there, they feel like they are working because they are at the office. And so when you are remote, when you're working from home, the challenge becomes, do I have to spend 8 or 9 or 10 hours? And in those 8, 9, or 10 hours, am I just being busy? Am I just numbing myself to all the things that are going on? So we want to make sure that you are understanding from your team's perspective, what are the outcomes you're looking for them to accomplish? And if they can do those in 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day, so be it. That may be the case. Some people will end the day. I saw this yesterday, a comment made by someone working from home that they are more tired at the end of a day working from home than they were at the office. And I would challenge that notion that they were probably filling their day with busy work, not productive work. So we have to make sure that we are helping our teams to focus on what the most important outcomes are, and we're driving that kind of behavior. That leads us to the second one. So the second issue that people are having is access versus availability. And access versus availability, as you can see in this picture, your kids don't normally have access to you during the day. Your spouse may not have access to you. Your dog or cats may not have access to you. But now they do, and there is a big difference between access and availability. And so one of the goals for your teams would be to help set expectations at home about when they are accessible and when they are not available. Because accessibility is all day, but availability may be in limited spurts. So we need to make sure that we're setting expectations with our spouses, with our children. And I've always heard this and maintained that an uncommunicated expectation is just a pre-planned resentment. And the last thing that we want to have happen with work from home teams is them beginning to resent their wife or husband and children, or dog for that matter. So make sure that we are setting expectations properly about when there is access and when there is access but no availability. And the way I do this at home, just food for thought, is I have a big red stop sign, and the stop sign is hung on my door when I am not available. That might be in a time like now where we're doing a webinar. It might be on an important phone call or group chat. When that red stop sign goes away, there might be a yellow one. That means knock on my door, and if I open it, you can come in and we can chat. And if it's green or the door is open, then you have access. You can come in and talk to me anytime. It is a weird environment that we're in right now. And as business begins to either slow down or ratchet up, depending on the business you're in, just be mindful of that people are having access versus availability issues, particularly if you are working on a card table in your living room. And I've seen those pictures. So kudos and God bless those of you that are doing that. All right. The third thing is understanding floodlight versus spotlight mentality. And the floodlight versus spotlight mentality, as it relates to working from home, is this. When you are at the job site, you're in your office, it's very easy to see the floodlight, to see everything that you need to do and what Q2 and Q3 and Q4 are all about. You know what your annual goals are. You know what's going to happen for the year. The challenge is when you move to a work from home scenario, you have to begin leading with a very spotlight mentality. And the spotlight mentality is about not how much stuff are we going to get done this quarter or this year, but what are you going to get done over the next 2 or 3 days? Because we have to keep the momentum going on the projects that we're working on. We can get lost in the floodlight of COVID-19 and all of the craziness going on in our society. We have to, as leaders, begin to put the spotlight on what are the most important things and refocus our team's efforts on those. Chad, anything to add on that?
No, I just go back to number one really quick. I think that time versus outcomes, I think that has been what I'm finding with the people that I'm working with, is that has been the biggest mental challenge, is that, people are used to being there all day. And if they get done with, what they need to accomplish that day, they almost feel guilty for not working, or they almost just sit there in numbness, as Adam mentioned, and just try to fill their day, which just, again, creates more anxiety and creates more stress. So that's the biggest. I mean, all four of these are fantastic, but that's the biggest one that I found that I'm running into, to how to help people realize, what are my outcomes when I'm done? How do I be productive for the rest of the day? Maybe not necessarily entrenched with work. Maybe it's with my family. Maybe it's with something that I want to do. Maybe it's self-care, whatever it is that might be.
Perfect. The last, number 4, is the need for connection or socialization. I had this great conversation with my daughter, and I said, I feel like we're in some weird social experiment. And she said, yeah, Dad, it's as if we're in someone's Sims game and they hit the pandemic button and we're all just experiencing the results of what that pandemic button was all about. So people still have the need for connection and socialization, despite the fact that they're at home, either by themselves or with family. So one of the things that we are doing is we are doing 90-minute sprints with a team. So we might put 2 or 3 people on a Zoom chat, and we will just work together. We might have, a coffee chat for 10 minutes, and then we dive in and we set a timer for 90 minutes and we all work simultaneously, but the windows are open. So we're getting some of that connection and socialization that's required. We are a very social being, all of us, whether you're introverted or extroverted. And there is something about being in an office space where you can pop in and ask someone a question, or stop at someone's door and just have a cup of coffee with them for 5 or 10 minutes. One of the ways that we do that, one of the tools and resources we use is a tool called Voxer. It's Voxer. And Voxer allows you to almost have walkie-talkie chats with other people. And I will often connect with people just for real quick, brief chats using Voxer, but it feels like we're connected and there's some socialization going on. So we bring up all these things to let you know there are at least 4 challenges that work from home teams are having. Now we want to give you a strategy for how to address those and how to keep your teams warm. And this is the big deal. When folks move to a remote work environment, it's possible for the work that they're doing to cool off. And by cool off, I just mean it's not as present. They're not as aware of what's going on at work because you're just not connected with all the happenings on a day-to-day basis. So here's how we keep them warm. We recommend what we call a heat meeting. And a heat conversation or a heat meeting could be one-on-one. It could be as a team. It could be with your family members. It could be with your significant other. It basically goes like this. The H stands for, how are you doing? And as a leader, it's important to check in with your team, not just how are you doing? And Chad, if you'll role play this with me real quick, I'd say, Chad, how are you doing? And your answer would be,
I'm doing good.
Doing good. Chad, how are you really doing?
Well, it's a roller coaster right now. Sometimes I'm doing good. Sometimes I'm not doing good. Sometimes I think that I have optimism, and sometimes I have doubt. And so I'm just trying to battle through it like everybody else.
Yeah. And I would say as a leader, I understand that. I appreciate it. I'm in the same boat, pal, but together we're going to get through this. Chad, let me ask you, and this, we go to E, what are your expectations for this week? And what we're asking in this question, what are your expectations for today or this week, goes back to the spotlight thinking. I don't necessarily need to say, hey, where are you at for our quarterly goals or our annual sales revenue? I'm going to say, what do you want to get done in the next 3 days? That is expectations. A is appreciation, acknowledgement, or accountability. And it could be one of these, it could be two of these, it could be all three of these, but it sounds something like this. Chad, I just want to acknowledge you for the fact that I know you always work from home, but I also know that, Sarah's not there all the time and the boys aren't there all the time. And now that you're working through that, I just want to acknowledge that you're doing a great job. And I appreciate the hard work you put in this week because we had a ton done leading up to this webinar. Accountability looks like this. You mentioned you wanted to get these 3 things done next week. What is the best way for me to hold you accountable to that? And I might even say, are you interested in working together on that over a 90-minute or 3-hour, 4.5-hour period, just so we know we can hold each other accountable to getting that done? So A is appreciation, could be acknowledgement, could be accountability. And the last letter in HEAT is T. It is together. We'll get through this. It's making sure that your team knows they're not alone, that the company has their back, that you have their back. And again, this may be supervisor to direct report. It may be team member to team member. What HEAT becomes is a very, very simple framework to have a conversation. And it answers the challenge that some leaders are having where they're saying, we just don't know what to say. I keep saying the same things over and over again. I don't really know what to say. Well, in this case, if you go through HEAT, and it could be any collection of these or parameter around this. I had this conversation with my daughter the other day in the car. I said, babe, how are you doing with all of this? And she's like, I'm missing my friends. And I said, well, what are your expectations around getting back together with them? And she said, well, when all this goes past, I want to have a sleepover. I want to hang out with them more. And I said, well, have you considered doing Zoom chats and hangouts? And yeah, but it's just not the same. Okay, cool. Well, I just want to appreciate you for having a really positive outlook on life at home and getting along with your brothers. And I just want you to know together, we're going to get through this. And she's like, yeah, I appreciate that. It is a very simple framework to have what can be a somewhat complicated conversation. Chad, anything to add?
The only thing that I would add is that keep in mind that HEAT is a conversation. It's not necessarily a surface level HEAT. Like, I think that you need to create conversation around each letter. Like, how are you peel that onion a little bit? Like Adam mentioned, surfacely, people are going to say, I'm doing fine, or I'm doing good, or whatever. But, tell me more. In what ways? Explain that to me. Say a little bit more about that. And then what are the expectations? Making sure we call it peeling the onion in the conversation to make sure we really get to the heart of the where your team is and where they are and how we can best support them. I think, but I think, and I give credit to Adam, this HEAT acronym has just played out greatly in the past 5 to 10 days with everybody that I've been working with. So thanks, Adam, for coming up with it.
Hey, absolutely, Chad. And we will continue to put out great content like this, y'all. As we mentioned at the very beginning, Renzo is the name of our organization. We consider ourselves architects of human capital, of environments, and of outcomes. And all of those collectively make up your culture. We believe that culture and creating a culture that people love to come to work to is the most important thing. I think it was, who said it? Peter Drucker, that culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. So we are here to help. Know that if you're struggling with something specific, we would love to know about it. And we will work on resources to assist you and your company culture. If there are great ideas posted in the comment, in the chat box, we will take those ideas. We'll put together training just like this. Our goal is to make it bite-sized, digestible, and easily implementable. Because that makes a difference in what we're all going through today. So with that, we have recorded this. We will send it out to the entire mailing list. And if anyone has any suggestions about other topics you'd like to see covered, please drop those in the chat box. We appreciate your time, and we'll stick around to watch the chat box for the next 3 to 4 minutes. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, Stephen.
Hey, man. How are
Hey,
you, Adam?
good, good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for doing this. That was great.
Yeah, our pleasure. Glad you joined us.
Yeah, no, thanks. And thanks for unmuting me. Uh, I had just a question. Could you just clarify how you use Voxer?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically I have, I have a limited size team, but every one of my team members is on Voxer.
Hmm.
And so when we have a question or there's a quick touch base on, hey, did that invoice end up getting sent out? Or, hey, how are things going for you today? We do a quick voicemail back and forth. And it's a really unique system because if the other person is also on Voxer, it almost it almost functions like a two-way radio, kind of like the old um, oh gosh, what were those? The original
Yeah.
one of the original
Nextel?
Nextel. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Nextel.
Yeah.
So it functions much like a Nextel phone, but you can hear them going back and forth on the conversation. So if you've got time and the thread is open, if you will, or the channel is open, you could have a back and forth conversation with someone over Voxer. And that allows me to do quick touch bases, check-ins with my team, in terms of I need a very quick question answered and they'll get right back to me. Or if they have time, we might do a back and forth. And at some point that might be like, hey, should we do this on Google Hangout or on a Zoom chat? And
And
so turns into,
it just sound, what is it? It's just more efficient than text.
I find it more efficient than texting. Yep,
Hmm.
absolutely. And I think there is an understanding, particularly with my team, that if we do a Vox, it's probably going to be a very quick back and forth as opposed to a long form conversation. So it may even be, hey, we need to get on the phone for 5 minutes and talk through this.
Hmm.
And I'll say, cool, let's set a time at 10 o'clock. All right, perfect. And that's the back and forth that we have on Voxer. But for whatever reason, it feels almost like you're intercomming with someone back and
Is
forth.
everybody hearing it or just the two of you?
Just the two of you, unless you've built a group Vox,
Yeah.
in which case everyone in the group would hear it.
Got it.
So think of it almost like a Slack line.
Yeah.
It's a Slack chat line for one particular project as an example, and everyone might be on that.
Got it.
Yep.
Cool.
My end goal, in all honesty, is to reduce or eliminate email as much as humanly possible, because it is the bane of my existence right now.
Yeah.
It seems that email has exploded over the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, totally.
And I think you realize how many mailing lists you're on. And thank God I know Olive Garden's COVID-19 guidelines now, but at some point it's like, oh my gosh, seriously, I'll go back into REI when all this passes. I don't really need to know this from everyone, understand why they do it.
Yeah.
But if we can eliminate as much of that email inner team, I think the better.
Certainly. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Be well.
Hey, thanks for the question, Stephen.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
See you soon, man.
Thanks, Chad.
See you, buddy.
See you, Bo.